And then I'll just take 30 seconds or whatever to explain what you're dealing with.
In terms of the fact that, so we're dealing with this issue of, would you want to go over this? Would that be preferred to start? Just talk about.
Just which is, I mean,
yeah.
since you didn't know you were going to do this, their subject matter is FIFA, which is the Federación Internacional de Football Association. I think that's sort of redundant. There's like an F at the end and then association at the end of it, at the other end. And so basically this is the World Cup. And their issue is the ethics in terms of relationships with host countries and sponsors. So whatever you see in this booklet was not the presentation. This was an earlier draft and included by.
I brought a revised copy today.
And you have the real thing today.
Yeah, we're actually talking to Coca-Cola, which is one of the sponsors of FIFA. So we're not directly talking to FIFA. We're talking to Coca-Cola as a sponsor of FIFA, urging them to discontinue their sponsorship of FIFA to put pressure on them to make these ethical changes.
Okay, great. Let me get this started for you. Here you go.
Thank you for having us back today. My name is Jennifer Meyer. This is Sean Johnson. We are a consulting team from Johnson & Johnson, and we're speaking to you, the board of directors of Coca-Cola. We wanted to talk to you again today about your sponsorship of FIFA, but today we really wanted to focus more on this ethical framework that we're suggesting for both you and for FIFA. Now, FIFA has a long history of ethical violations. Their bidding process has been shown to be corrupt. Many upper-level employees have been taking bribes from countries who are putting in these bids. In 2010, the World Cup in South Africa set up what was called the FIFA courts, in which swift justice was enacted. This at first seemed like a positive thing, but it actually turned out to be quite harsh. There were a lot of harsh punishments that were enacted that didn't really fit the crime committed. In 2014, the World Cup in Brazil was also sort of an ethical fiasco. FIFA effectively lobbied to, get rid of a public safety law to allow beer to be sold in stadiums in Brazil. A few of the stadiums built in Brazil prior to the World Cup were also built really without thinking of sustainable use, and so that's really a big problem as well. Now, the choices for the 2018 and the 2022 World Cups really are questionable at best. Russia, chosen for the 2018 World Cup, of course has this really poor reputation in the international arena for its dealings with Ukraine and with its human rights violations in regards to the LGBT community. Qatar, chosen for the 2022 World Cup, is probably the worst choice of all. It has probably the longest history of violating human rights. Its system of kafala effectively makes Qatar a modern-day slave state. And so it's estimated that by 2022, when the World Cup starts, more than 4,000 workers will die building stadiums for the World Cup. Now, these ethical violations, of course, have a huge impact on both FIFA's brand image and Coca-Cola's brand image as a sponsor. And this will, of course, also have a very negative impact on Coca-Cola's company profits. Now, we're suggesting that FIFA really needs to have transparency in their bidding process. They need to have fair judgment when they're choosing these countries to host World Cups. They need to take responsibility for the humanitarian aspects of these World Cups, and they need to be tough in their dealings with these other countries and on their internal corruption. Now, this solidarity agreement that we're recommending between the sponsors of FIFA will provide an ethical framework for both FIFA and its sponsors that will help fix these problems and help us all move forward together in a positive way. Now, we just want to remind you that this solidarity agreement, by signing it, you will incur no financial or legal cost. And now, Mr. Johnson here will explain more about this ethical framework that I mentioned.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. So, when we're discussing this model that's being proposed by the Solidarity Agreement, we're discussing a model built in virtue ethics. It's what we've chosen to try and explain these notions of fairness, transparency, toughness, and responsibility in the activity of these businesses themselves. When you're discussing an entity such as Coca-Cola or FIFA, they have to be considerate about who they choose to do business with, in what ways they choose to do business with them, and the extent to which that business is mutually beneficial. Ultimately, parties don't want to come into a business setting if they don't believe that they'll get some sort of benefit from it. That's part of the implicit precondition for business to even take place. So toughness, fairness, transparency, and responsibility in terms of the structure of FIFA will ensure that different sponsor organizations such as Coke are able to be certain that their investments won't damage the company brand, won't damage humanitarian values, won't damage the declared ethics, such as Coke's declared ethics, to an extent that would be ridiculous given the point of nonprofit giving, which attempts to improve the company's image and achieve the company's ends beyond mere profit. In order to fulfill these particular virtues, we're discussing humanitarian ethical codes and their implementation into the bidding process. These humanitarian codes would ensure, for instance, that there isn't significant destruction to favelas, for instance, in a country like Brazil, without there being adequate justification and a plan to move these people into adequate housing, as well as ensuring that whatever buildings are built are sustainable. There needs to be a degree of transparency ensured in the bidding process. This process has caused FIFA to make deals that either damage the host countries or damage FIFA's interests, or often both, as we're discussing in terms of the damage to FIFA's brand. Responsibility in terms of FIFA's ability to actually take care of those things necessary for its ends. FIFA is an organization that has a declared dedication to sport, and in order to achieve sport, which is the idea of giving to a nonprofit organization, an entity such as FIFA needs to ensure that its activities don't result in a bad name for sport or don't create a bad reputation for the organization itself in order to allow it to continue operating. And in terms of toughness, FIFA as an organization needs to ensure that everything that it does or that it agrees to is up to the highest possible standards that an organization, a nonprofit, but a nonprofit with international reach should be able to achieve. So the process by which this interaction works, business ethics assumes a particular end goal. Business is an activity that requires a particular relationship between all parties involved, and that relationship usually expects that all of the individuals within it will receive some sort of positive benefit. It's not a zero-sum game, but a positive-sum game. And we have to consider the strange network and complex network of relationships here. Coke is expecting a return from its investment in FIFA, and FIFA in turn is expecting an investment in terms of its relationship with the host countries. The host countries themselves are expecting to profit from the buildings that are there, either in terms of national prestige or ideally in terms of trade, in terms of travel and tourism. Oftentimes, in the particular instances, this is not the case. The events in Brazil did not particularly bring Brazil a significant amount of money, and it caused a significant amount of instability in the country, despite the fact that the population wildly loves the game of soccer and wildly loved hosting the cup. The process itself by which the country went about bringing building and in making deals with the relevant corporations made it so that the local populace did not want to do it. You can find a similar cycle of problems in South Africa, in Qatar, and to a more limited extent in Russia. each of these countries, either in the way that it was carried out or in the mere selection itself, demonstrates a degree of corruptness in the organization of FIFA, or demonstrates a supreme misjudgment on their part. Either way, does a business such as Coke want to do business with, or want to donate or sponsor an organization that either has difficulty enforcing ethical norms within itself, or I apologize, either has difficulty enforcing ethical norms within itself, or has difficulty being competent in its activities. So I thank you for bringing us back and seeing us again today to discuss the ethical issues, and I hope that you find the solidarity agreement plausible. Thank you.
Thank you.